Kieran Maddox ruled with silence, Adrian Lockjaw Pike enforced with fire, and Malik Rowe chose survival over submission inside Wollesham, the prison they didn't just live in, they controlled. Wollesham Maximum Security Prison stood like a concrete beast in South London, surrounded by high walls topped with razor wire and silence that carried weight. It wasn't just the structure that made it terrifying, it was its reputation. This prison was where the worst of the worst were sent, not just murderers, but men who led empires of violence, who ran criminal organizations from behind bars, and who controlled streets from within cells. Over time, the gangs inside Wollesham stopped fearing the guards. The guards in turn started fearing the inmates. That's when everything changed. The prison was originally designed to house 500 inmates. It now held over 1,000, and most of them belonged to one gang or another. There were turf lines even within the cells. Albanians controlled the kitchens, East London crews controlled the laundry, and the showers were under a silent agreement: enter at your own risk. Power was currency, and violence was the only language respected. But one man had risen above them all. Kieran Maddox, a name that echoed across every corridor. His presence was a myth before he even arrived. They said he had once ripped out a man's jaw with his bare hands. Others claimed he'd taken out an entire rival crew without firing a shot. But the most feared detail was true. He had filed his own teeth into razor-like points, earning him the name Iron Teeth. He was transferred to Wollesham after a mass gang killing in Manchester. Within a month of his arrival, he had seized control of the prison's darkest corners. Kieran didn't scream or threaten, he stared. And when he stared, men stopped talking. His silence was louder than most men's rage. He operated like a war general. His second-in-command, Adrian Lockjaw Pike, was even worse. A man with a face scarred from fire and eyes that looked half dead, he handled enforcement. If someone crossed, Kieran Lockjaw handled it with surgical brutality. What made Wollesham different wasn't just the violence, it was the complete breakdown of authority. Guards had been beaten, some had disappeared, no one knew who ran the prison anymore. The official warden stayed locked in his office. Paperwork said he was in charge. But everyone knew that Kieran ran Wollesham. The gangs didn't try to escape. Why would they? Inside these walls, they had more control than outside. Drugs flowed freely, phones were smuggled in daily, weapons were handmade in the machine room and passed from cell to cell like currency. Wollesham had become a city within a city, and the rules that applied outside meant nothing here. And beneath the surface of that chaos, Kieran was building something darker, an empire that didn't just rule the prison, but reshaped it. Cells were being moved, hidden passageways were cleared out. Entire sections of the prison had gone dark with no explanation. Something was happening beneath everyone's feet, and no one outside had the faintest idea. Wollesham was no longer a prison. It was a kingdom, and the king wore iron teeth. It began without warning. One inmate, Jaden Carr, failed to show up for morning roll call. He was a quiet man, mid-20s, doing time for fraud, not affiliated with any gang, not known to cause trouble. The guards assumed it was a mistake. Maybe he'd been transferred or missed in the head count. But when they checked the system, there was no record of a transfer, no incident report, no explanation at all. It was as if Jaden had vanished into thin air. Within 3 days, another inmate disappeared. Then a third the following week. None of them had gang connections. All were serving short sentences. The administration chalked it up to record-keeping issues, something common in overcrowded institutions like Wollesham, but the truth was far more sinister. Deep inside the prison, in an abandoned wing no longer used by staff, a new power base was being built. Kieran Maddox had taken over an old sealed-off section known as Block H. Originally closed due to structural issues, it was now reopened, repurposed, and repainted in darkness. Most guards avoided that side of the building. Those who ventured near claimed the cameras didn't work there. The lights would flicker, the radios would go silent. They called it the depths. Kieran and his most trusted men had turned the depths into their base of operations. This wasn't just about controlling the drug flow or prison trade anymore. This was something deeper, more permanent. The missing inmates weren't dead, not right away. They were taken there, used for labor, interrogation, or sometimes simply removed for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Kieran understood something most criminals didn't control, didn't come from fear alone. It came from invisibility. If he could create a world within Wollesham that no one could access, he could operate without limits. Guards were paid off, records were altered, and threats were quietly delivered to anyone who asked too many questions. The prisoners knew what was happening, but no one spoke, not even whispers. To talk about the depths was to invite a slow disappearance. And if your name ever appeared on one of Kieran's internal hit lists, there was nothing you could do to stop what came next. Kieran's growing empire had levels. There were runners, messengers, soldiers, enforcers. Everyone had a rank, a duty, a reward. Those who followed orders were protected. Those who didn't vanished. His network reached beyond the prison walls. Phones smuggled into the depths were used to coordinate activities on the outside. Drug shipments, hits, robberies. Kieran was still running his criminal empire as if he were free. Adrian Lockjaw Pike was in charge of enforcement inside the depths. He would select the targets, organize their removal, and decide who lived and who disappeared. His presence became synonymous with death. If Lockjaw appeared at your cell, you had minutes, maybe seconds left. And yet the guards said nothing. Management stayed quiet. On paper, Wollesham looked no different. But behind locked doors and blacked out corridors, a shadow world was growing. A world where rules no longer applied. A world that swallowed the weak whole. Malik Rowe had once been one of the most feared enforcers on the outside. His name carried weight across East London, especially in drug corridors stretching from Peckham to Brixton. But inside Wollesham, Malik wasn't a leader. He kept his head down, avoided gang politics, and focused on surviving his sentence. He was older than most, worn by years of street life and the betrayals that came with it. He had no interest in becoming anyone's pawn again. But in a prison like Wollesham, neutrality wasn't safety. It was vulnerability. One morning, Malik found a folded note beneath his mattress. There was no name, no handwriting he could immediately recognize, just 5 words written in shaky ink. Your name is on Kieran's list. That was it. No explanation, no reason, just a silent death sentence, disguised as a warning. He sat in his cell for hours, replaying every recent interaction, every glance in the yard, every word in the corridor. Had he said something wrong, refused the wrong favor, or had Kieran simply decided he was a threat? In Wollesham, you didn't need a reason to vanish. You just needed to exist in the wrong moment. But Malik wasn't like the others. He'd survived too many wars on the outside to ignore the signs. This wasn't random. Someone had risked their safety to warn him, and only one person could have done that, Darren Lynch. Darren was a guard, but not in the traditional sense. He had been working at Wollesham for nearly 7 years, and in that time had become entangled in every illegal operation imaginable. From smuggling in drugs to leaking inmate records, Darren sold his loyalty to the highest bidder. Most inmates hated him, some respected him, but Malik knew something others didn't. Darren had limits, and lately Darren had been scared. Over the next few days, Malik started watching more closely. He began noticing small things that didn't add up. Meals delivered late to certain cells, guards whispering near Block H and walking away quickly, empty cleaning carts returning full. Something was moving beneath the surface, something large. What Malik uncovered, quietly and carefully, sent chills through his spine. Kieran Maddox wasn't planning a riot. Riots were messy, temporary. No, he was planning something far more permanent. a total takeover of the prison. He'd already bought off several guards, had files on administrators that included bribes and blackmail material, and was preparing to lock down the facility from the inside. Through hidden phones and smuggled devices, he was also in communication with outside gangs, coordinated movements, money transfers, threats. It was all happening in real time. Malik realized that Kieran wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to make Wollesham the center of his operations, a fortress, not a cage. But then Darren disappeared.
No warning, no goodbye, no transfer notice, just gone.
Malik knew instantly what that meant. Darren had crossed a line. Maybe the note had been discovered. Maybe someone saw them talking. Regardless, the message was clear. Kieran knew everything, and the walls were closing in. Malik had two choices: wait to be taken, or find a way to bring the monster down from the inside. Fear gripped Wollesham like a tightening rope. Rumors of a riot had started weeks ago, spreading from cell to cell like wildfire. Some claimed it would happen on a Sunday. Others said it would start in the kitchen during lunch hour. Everyone had a version, and none of them were good. The guards, already cautious, were now on edge, twitchy fingers on batons, eyes scanning every hallway for the first sign of chaos. But the riot never came. That was Kieran Maddox's brilliance. He didn't want an explosion of violence. He wanted silence, control, and submission. And he was getting it not with fists, but with leverage. While the prison braced for fire and blood, Kieran had changed his strategy. He had found something more powerful than weapons: information. Deep within the depths, his gang had built a surveillance system. Old security equipment had been rewired, guards bribed into giving access to camera feeds and audio channels. For months, Kieran had been collecting conversations, tracking movements, and gathering evidence on the prison's own leadership. He now had recordings of the deputy warden admitting to cutting deals with inmates. He had phone logs that traced guard activity to criminal networks. And he had a folder of documents exposing financial corruption so deep it could bring down careers. When he delivered his message, it didn't come with threats. It came with copies. Printed sheets were slipped under cell doors, in staff lockers, even placed on the warden's desk. They were neatly labeled, time-stamped, and impossible to ignore. The message was quiet but clear: let me run it, or your lives outside end here.
What followed was silence.
Deafening, dangerous silence. No lockdowns, no cell searches, no retaliation. It was as if the system had decided to look away. The administration withdrew its presence in Block H entirely. Guards stopped patrolling that side of the prison. Even internal reports began skipping sections of the daily logs. It was official without ever being declared. Kieran Maddox now ruled Wollesham fully and without opposition. From his throne deep within the depths, he controlled food schedules, cell rotations, even visitation rights. His soldiers patrolled the halls more confidently than the guards. Inmates had no choice but to follow orders. Those who didn't vanished into black corridors, never seen again. The gang stopped fighting. Instead, they aligned under Kieran's command, accepting that it was safer to be ruled than destroyed. The outside world had no idea. On paper, Wollesham was stable. Reports showed reduced violence, fewer incidents, and improved inmate cooperation. Politicians praised the warden's new approach to order. Behind closed doors, however, there was panic. No one dared confront Kieran directly, fearing exposure. The prison wasn't just compromised, it was lost. In his final move, Kieran issued an internal message, this time a printed declaration: Wollesham belongs to us now. You had your chance to control it. You failed. We won't. And just like that, one of the most secure prisons in London had quietly become a gang fortress. No riot, no blood, just a silent shift in power that no one outside dared to acknowledge. Kieran Maddox believed he had won. Wollesham was no longer a prison in his eyes. It was a stronghold, a seat of power. From within its crumbling walls, he operated like a crime lord, issuing orders to outside networks, managing rival gangs with ruthless diplomacy, and holding the prison's management hostage through fear and blackmail. No one challenged him. No one dared. But power always creates cracks, and even kings forget to watch their foundations. Unknown to Kieran, his downfall had already begun. Hidden in the quiet work of one man, Malik Rowe, while others had surrendered to the new order, Malik had taken a risk few would dare. He had made contact with an external intelligence unit known only as S-17. This secret government task force specialized in rooting out organized crime and internal corruption. They worked in silence, off the books, answering to no public authority. Malik, through a smuggled phone and coded messages, had been feeding S-17 everything: guard schedules, movement patterns, tunnel maps beneath the depths, and even names of compromised staff. Every piece of intelligence was logged, cross-verified, and stored for the right moment. That moment came quietly on a rainy Friday morning. Just before dawn, while most inmates were still asleep and the guards were in transition shifts, S-17 black helicopters hovered above the facility, blocking any aerial escape. Power was cut, communications were jammed. Simultaneously, operatives disguised as emergency maintenance entered the building. Within 6 minutes, the depths were sealed. Explosives collapsed access tunnels. Smoke bombs disoriented gang enforcers. Rooms were cleared with precision. Anyone who resisted was neutralized with non-lethal force. Lockjaw, Kieran's brutal second-in-command, was nowhere to be found. Some say he escaped during the chaos. Others believe he died in one of the sealed corridors, buried beneath the walls he once ruled. Kieran himself was found in his private cell, dressed, prepared, and eerily calm. He didn't fight, he didn't speak. S-17 agents bound him in electric restraints, devices designed to prevent even the slightest resistance, and led him out without a word. The entire operation lasted under 2 hours. By the time the regular prison staff returned to duty, they were met with silence. The depths were flooded and shut off permanently. High-level guards were arrested on site. A new warden was brought in by military escort. Every inmate affiliated with Kieran's network was transferred to isolated black sites across the UK. As for Malik Rowe, he vanished. No mention in the final reports. No name listed in witness logs. He had been extracted by S-117, given a new identity, and hidden from any retaliation. His silence had dismantled an empire. Kieran Maddox was never seen again in public. Rumors swirled about a top-secret facility in the Highlands where he was kept in underground isolation. Others whispered that he was being studied, not just in prison, monitored to learn how someone could build an empire inside the very system meant to destroy him. Wollesham was restored, but its scars remained, and though Kieran was gone, the gang culture he had nurtured had already spread to other prisons. The kingdom had fallen, but the legend had just begun.